Using alcohol-based ink markers is a great way to add tone to a scene. And tone can really make a nice line drawing pop out and come alive into a three-dimensional realism. And it's not that hard. In this video, I talk you through the choices I've made. Here I have a line drawing of the new town hall in Berlin, although in fact it's well over 100 years old. I drew this bearing in mind that I was going to apply sketch marker tone, and so I didn't do any hatching as I might have otherwise done to indicate shade or shadow or local color. So in this video, that's what we're going to do. And I'm using Copic sketch markers, shades of a neutral gray color. If you'd like to see the video on how I drew this directly in ink, totally freehand, check out that video. But for now, we want to consider how can we bring out all that's in this scene more fully by using tone. Now, obviously, this tree is very dark and there's a very dark shadow across the road here. And there's a lovely shadow on this building from this tree. And then we have some local color as well. And that's simply the fact that the natural color of this asphalt on the road in light is a darker color than the stone on the front of this building. And the color of the tiles on this little dome on top of the tower is a darker color than the color of the stone. Or that this wall in shade is a darker color than the same wall in sunlight. So we want to use tone to reflect all these things. Before we start, let's have a quick look at the markers we're going to be using. The markers I'm using are Copic sketch markers. They have two ends. They have a chisel end and they have a brush end, which has a slight flexibility to it. And this is the one I always use. The other thing I found very helpful is to make a color chart showing the tones that I have to play with. I use this to help me work out what tone is the appropriate tone for what I'm drawing. And I'm going to put this at the top here, probably be just out of camera view, but I'll be using that the whole time. So whatever brand marker you use, I can really suggest you do this. I also suggest that you do it on the same paper that you're actually going to draw with, because the paper surface does sometimes affect how the ink looks when it dries. My other trick I'll let you in on is that sometimes I'll simply print my reference in black and white, and that shows me how it looks. So I can see that the leaves of this tree really is the darkest section, and then this shadow coming across the road, second darkest, and there are a few very dark sections, the undersides of some of the architecture, but generally this shadow on this wall is the next darkest, and then possibly this shade on this part of the building, and there's some more shadow being cast on this side from the tree, and then there's both shade and local color involved in the dome. Since I've printed this off to show you, I might as well use it. The other thing I'm going to do is to apply tape around the edges to contain my tone. The impact tone has is in relation to other tones. It's really the contrast between adjoining tones, which is the really important thing to look out for and to manipulate when we apply tone. It's not so much what any particular tone is, how light or how dark, but it's how we read it in relation to the tones next to it. There are two ways we can go. We can start with our lightest tone that we want to apply and then just keep getting darker, or we can start with our darkest tones so that we commit to a strong contrast. And I think I'm going to do both. I'm going to start with my three darkest tones, which will be this tone, and this tone. And then I'll switch to lighter tones. For this dark tone, I might try an N7. I want to use a nice light touch, and I particularly want to get a nice varied silhouette to this tree. The fact that I've done the hatching lets me do this a lot more quickly than I could. But I'm not just going over my hatching, I'm actually drawing more from the reference photo than from my line work. This is not colouring in, I'm still continuing my original drawing. And I'm also going to suggest down here, so this was an N7, I'm going to use an N5, which is still going to be a relatively dark tone to have used, just to give a little bit of variation for our eye. that we're not seeing the whole thing as just this enormous black blob. One of the things I do like doing, even though I use no pencil to draw the outline of this drawing, I do like sometimes to just get my tone outlines done. I'm thinking for this section, I'm going to use my 5 because this is really the second darkest area. Now, I think with tone work, it is good to be as brisk with it as we can. So that's 2 of our 3 big tone areas done. And now we've got the front of this wall. Now I need to be careful I avoid putting tone on this lamppost. And I need to leave a few bits just to indicate where the light's getting through the canopy. And I've decided to use a 4 for this. Well, that was a great start, wasn't it? Okay, so what do I do with this line in the wrong place? Firstly, I don't worry about it. Fortunately, it's straight, and I think I'll make that into a downpipe. But now I'll go back to putting the lines where I want them to go. I'm leaving slits for the windows because we can see that there are lighter tones in those. So now I'm going to actually put a bit of colour in those windows, and I'm going to use a 2 because that's a couple of values below the 4 I've just used. I might use a 2 for some of them, and then I'll use a 1 for the closest ones. I'm going to use the 4 for this line under here. I'm just going to go over the 4 here, make it a bit darker, because I'm going to use a 3 there, and I want it to feel just a bit lighter. And so now that I've got the 3, I'm just looking to see what other things are approximately that same colour. And I think I'll use this 3 for the local colour on these roofs. Now, by going over in the one spot, you can slightly darken the effect of these tones. Now, up here on this wall here, I'm going to use a 2 because just as our lines work better in the distance being a little bit lighter, so our shadows work better being a bit lighter. So I'm going to use the 2 for this because this is kind of just a bit lighter than that. And I'm not trying to line this up particularly with any lines I've drawn. That would be impossible anyway, given the caliber of the lines there. While I've got my 2, I think I will do this wall in a 2. And again, I've managed to put it in the wrong place. But again, I'm not going to worry about that. This can become a downpipe. I do get a bit distracted filming and trying to think of the next thing I'm going to say sometimes. So I should have put the tone just on the left side of this. But it is a great example to show you just don't worry about things that aren't quite what you'd planned. It's not going to be nearly as important as it feels like when you've just done it. I'm going to use 4 and I will make this in effect a downpipe. And that's worrying me less already. Just to keep our relative values correct, where this shadow goes over the downpipe, I'll make it a bit darker. On this tower, I'm going to use a 3. Having said that though, I'm going to start with a 2 and then do a bit of work with the 3. And now I'm going to get a 0. I'm going to use a 3 for this darkest part. Now I'll use a 2 for most of the rest of the shade and shadow. It's good to notice things such as this angle here is a diagonal line. It's not straight across. They're the little details that if you get right will build up to add a much more credible sense of reality to your drawing. Here we have another diagonal line there. The most important thing putting tone up here is simply to make clearer the front of the facade of the new town hall down here and also the back of this van here. I'm going to use a 0, my lightest colour, for the asphalt colour up the back there. And I'm also going to use a 0 for all of these cars. And now I can start to have a look and think, okay, does that need to be more or less? Come in with a 4 under the van. This asphalt, I'll use a 2 for that. I'm going to use a 1 for this van. And I'm going to do the same here. I do want to indicate also the local colour of the footpath. 1 is probably the best tone to use for that. Now, the difference isn't as great as I would have hoped. I will just come back with a little more ink on this edge because it really is the contrast between the two that we're wanting on that gutter in. Now I've got this grass here. So I'm using a 0. On the borders of my drawings, I often like to let them get a little gestural. Detail and precision brings attention, and I don't want attention down here. I'm going to use 5. I'm going to go to a 3. 1 for this. Don't want this to be a smooth finish because it's a footpath. There's a doorway here. Looking at my black and white photo, I actually think that this is too light, and this is definitely too light there. This was a 2. To make this darker, I have to bring it into being a 3. But I might just come a bit more heavily over the top again. I'll actually use my 3 overlapping here a little bit just to help strengthen the shadow. So I think that works a lot better there. I'll use a 2. I feel that works better. Probably at this tidying up stage. What needs to be done just to kind of bring things together a little bit. I'm going back to my 5, just strengthening that part underneath. This is a 3. It has tape on it because that's my way of warning myself that I've put the wrong ink in it when I refilled it. So it's not quite the original colour, and they're always a little bit darker. So I just wanted to add a little more darkness to here. I've now got ink bleeding across the line. So that's another thing just to be aware of, but it's not in a bad place. So now it's time to take off the tape. There we have it. There's just one thing I wanted to do. It is very hard to know where to stop. It's just like painting. I just wanted, though, strengthen that with a 3 and also this. I think that's it. I will post this black and white image along with the color image on my YouTube community page. So if you want to have a go drawing the new Berlin Town Hall, there's nothing stopping you. So give it a go. Have fun. I'll see you next time. Bye.